Dear all, thank you very much for coming to this session. One of the speaker or two of the speakers are having a little bit of a delay to come here due to their previous session, but they are heading here this room right now, so we are expecting to start in a few minutes. Thank you very much for understandings.
Sí, claro. Good morning, dear participants, distinguished speakers, co-organizers of this event. I'm Serena Fortuna. I'm the RED Plus team leader in the FAO organization. I'm also the UN RED program management team component and member of FAO from the FAO side. First of all, I would like to put our apologies for the delay in starting this session. Thank you very much for your patience. We were literally running, so that's why you still hear a bit of of heavy breath in my opening remarks here. Literally running from upstairs with the ministers down here with all of us in this conversation. So yes, again, good morning. Good afternoon and good evening for all the ones that are going to both hear from us in the future recording and also that are connected. This event, as all the sub-themes event, is web stream is also live, so also other participants from all over the countries and the continents can really follow us. The Enabling and Scaling Up Finance to Halt Deforestation is the second session of the sub-theme 1 of the World Forestry Congress. It has been organized by FAO and the UN RED program. Of course, the objective of this session is really to share the challenges and the opportunities for mainstreaming forest-positive commodity finance from both public and private sector initiatives. And the aim, of course, is to transform the global food system to really reduce the impact on deforestation and support sustainable commodity production. These aims are intertwined and need to really be achieved at the same time. They cannot be one without the other. Government expenditures play a significant role in financing nature, but of course, in this total, more than $500 billion per year. But of course, with almost half of the funding flowing into agricultural subsidies, it's really important to redesign government expenditures, ensuring policy coherence among sustainable consumption and production patterns to make sure that the use of the land is sustainable. All of these factors are critical to really turn the tide on deforestation, the main topic that we are discussing in the sub-theme 1. Of course, there is a growing momentum on the results-based finance after years and years of countries really working hard on achieving this important objective. Carbon markets and RED Plus are, of course, at the very center and core of this, and they may serve as boosters and complementary financing opportunities for such actions. The demand of carbon offset is rapidly surging, so that is also very importantly in terms of matching for countries to then match the demand. And they are stimulated by the recent approval of Article 6 at COP26. However, financial innovation in sustainable commodity supply chains and carbon finance-driven mechanisms to foster forest-positive agriculture are really urgently needed to halt and promote halt deforestation and promote effective investment. And here we are really honored today to hear from global leaders and key countries that are pioneering in these aspects of the work on these specific subjects. Now really to start the session, and now that we can really breathe, relax and hear the important contribution that we're going to receive, I would like to invite here my dear colleague Gabriela Abate, Head of Climate Change Mitigation Unit and Global Team Leader of the UN RED program at UNEP, to come here and to help us in the moderation of this session. Once again, warm welcomes from FAO and the UN RED program, and I hope you're going to enjoy the discussions today. Thank you.
Thanks, Serena. Thanks for running. Yeah, being here on time. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Before we start, I'd like to do a bit of housekeeping First is that we will be recording this session, and the event is being hosted in English, French, and Spanish. For those that are following us online, you can switch between languages. We will have, at the end, a section for questions and answers. If you have questions as the panelists are speaking, please raise your hand and somebody will come to you and record your question. We will try to include them all if there is time. Now, on your screen, if we go back one slide, what you have is the schedule for today. To begin, we will proceed with the first panel on carbon finance mechanisms. We will hear from key countries, Ecuador and Japan, who will share strategies and lessons learned on scaling up finance for reducing deforestation. Then we will have contributions from key actors in securing this finance. We will hear from LEAF, and we will hear from BCS. Then we will have a presentation on an existing initiative on RED+, taking place in Africa. From there, we will go to the second panel. I would like to invite all the panelists to come to the front. Ben, you are in the second set of questions and answers, but please join us now on stage. Perfect. So let's get started. I am delighted to welcome our first speaker, Her Excellency Bianca Dagger, who is the Vice Minister of Environment of Ecuador. In that role, she coordinates matters related to regulation and control of environment and sustainable development for the benefits of citizens of Ecuador. Bianca, thanks for being with us. And I have a question on the government program Pro Amazonia, which is something that we all hear about. There are good news coming from Pro Amazonia. It is ambitious. The question is, how are you paying for it? I mean, how are you combining the different sources of finance, be that public spending, donor contributions, payment for results? How do you do that?
Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Muy buenos días con todos. Agradecer primero por la oportunidad.
First of all, thank you very much for providing me with this opportunity to speak before the audience today. And it's so good to be able to share my thoughts with the panelists. So for that, FAO and the Korean government, thank you very much. As you may be very well aware, the government of Ecuador has a lot of challenges and opportunities at the same time, in particular related to forest finance. Ecuador, in terms of the size, is a very small country, and also in terms of carbon emission, it really doesn't have a big carbon footprint, but nonetheless is a very vulnerable country in terms of climate change. Starting from 2008, Ecuador government has been implementing RED+ initiatives, And there was a change in government, but despite such a transition in the government, REP Plus projects have continued regardless of the government change. And also the efforts for saving the forest and protecting the forest have continued. First project was related to the results-based payment, which really produced a lot of tangible benefits. We received funding from GCF for this project implementation. And there was a collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture under the project called Sustainable Production. And also, we worked together with the Ministry of Environment. So going back to the question posed by the moderator, Ecuador faces significant challenges. 51% of the national land is primitive forest, still remains primitive. And of the 51%, 50% are managed as reserve areas. So they're protected reserves. And about 30% of Amazon is being managed with funding from the government. They're designated and operated as protected reserves. Total size is 1.6 hectares. So the national government program called Pro Amazonia is known to be quite effective, especially in terms of sustainable development. We believe the project is very beneficial in many ways, and those farmers in Amazon, as well as livestock, cacao, coffee product producers, and palm oil producers, they're all part of the traceability program under Pro Amazonia initiative. And there is another project that I want to introduce to you, which is related to avoid deforestation in the production process. We have a certification program for proving that production was done without deforestation. So this is a certificate that we issue for the products that are produced without destroying the forest. For example, cacao coffee was chosen as a theme for the pilot project, and this is now being exported to European countries. Now, through this type of a mechanism, we're able to promote the main goal of sustainable production. And such can be done in the agriculture sector, and we're trying to replicate these best practices across the country. And we hope to be able to scale up our production under this initiative. And of course, we will need to have more financing for this type of initiative.
A bit more. It's like, how are you paying for it? Is that Ecuador is putting the bulk of resources? Is LEAF, GCF, other sources of foreign finance? How you do that?
Sí, es una buena pregunta. A nivel
That's a very good question indeed. In terms of conservation, Ecuador government finance would contribute to most of the funding needed for the implementation of the project. We call it social forest. So we designate certain forests as social forest, and 75% of funding for that is financed by the public sector. So that's coming from the government budget. Other funds come from GCF and other international bodies and organizations. But international assistance is still quite meager. So that needs to be scaled up further going forward. So in order to conserve Amazon, the funding mostly comes from the government coffer. And in relation to climate change, also in terms of forest protection, there are a lot of efforts needed. The Ecuador government has not been able to embark on such drive thus far. We need to increase a sense of awareness as well as an urgency. So we're asking on the international community to please engage in the efforts and provide their assistance. An early warning system also needs to be introduced. And also we need to be able to get more funding from the private sector as well. We believe we can mobilize private capital. And we made a proposal to this effect last year, and the private sector has accepted our proposal. Right now, we're trying to understand various requirements for technical sides. We're conducting a review on technical aspects of the program, but of course we need to understand that there could be opportunity cost as well, so we have to hurry.
Now I'd like to change tacks a little bit, and it's an honor to have Mr. Hiroshi Orita, the Deputy Director General of the Japanese Forestry Agency at the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. Mr. Orita has about 30 years of management experience, both from field level and headquarter experience in Japan. Mr. Orita, Japan has had a remarkable role in relation to cooperative approaches among countries, between countries. In fact, if I remember well, 25 years ago, the Kyoto Protocol came into existence. Again, if I remember well, it was signed in November of 1997. Now we have the Paris Agreement, Article 6, with the basics, perhaps 6.2, 6.4. I understand Japan is actively exploring how to use Article 6.2. Now, question is, from your perspective, how much can Article 6.2 go into stimulating, scaling up the investment needed in developing countries to reduce deforestation? Over to you.
Thank you, Gabriel. First of all, thank you so much for having me today. I'm delighted to be here to participate on this session hosted by FAO. Regarding your question, we believe that forests play a significant role in tackling climate change, so it is important to introduce private financing, including by promoting efforts under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement for sustainable forest management and to halt deforestation. I would like to show some slides. Please display the slide. About the left graph, since 1990, global forest area decreased by 178 million hectares, and the deforestation rate remains alarming. You all know that forests capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it in the form of wood. The right charts show that forestry and land use change sectors are responsible for 11% of the global greenhouse gas emissions due to deforestation and forest degradation. Next slide, please. The global community has agreed to tackle such issues. The Paris Agreement, which is a new international framework replacing the Kyoto Protocol, stipulates that parties are encouraged to take action to implement and support REDD+. At COP26 in last year, over 140 countries accounting for more than 90% of world forests have committed to work together to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030. In addition, the implementation guidelines for Article 6 of the Paris Agreement were successfully agreed. It is expected that the transfer of emission reductions and removals between countries will be promoted. Next slide, please. The Paris Agreement Article 6 implementation guidelines can be divided into three main documents as follows. Article 6.2 is so-called cooperative approaches, which is a bottom-up, decentralized, and bilateral approach. On the other hand, Article 6.4 is a top-down, centralized approach that succeeds CDM under the Kyoto Protocol. Lastly, Article 6.8 supports developing countries in ways such as capacity buildings. Next slide, please. Next, I would like to share our efforts and experiences in Japan. Japan has been promoting the Joint Crediting Mechanism, JCM, aiming for implementation under the Article 6.2. This is a mechanism which enables private companies to conduct mitigation activities in partner countries. The credit generated through this mechanism will be shared depending on their contribution. There are many benefits for partner countries' side. For example, partner countries can receive upfront payment for implementation actions in advance. Also, it can contribute to additional emission reductions through forest conservation. Furthermore, capacity building and enhancement of local livelihood can be achieved. Together with the Japanese private corporates, JCM RED Plus actions in Cambodia and Lao PDR have already been implemented for several years. Next slide, please. The Paris Agreement stipulates that each party shall prepare and maintain their nationally determined contributions for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. In the NDCs submitted by each country, more than 120 countries mention the use of Article 6. Experts estimate that up to 9 billion tons of additional global emission reductions could be generated by 2030 through the implementation of Article 6. Therefore, we believe that Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is crucial in the fight against climate change, and Japan will continue efforts to promote RED Plus under the JCM. Next slide, please. We will present more detailed information on JCM RED Plus at a side event tomorrow from 5:30 p.m. with the participation of research institutes and related countries. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Orita. Let me follow up with a question. Maybe you could also refer us to your side event later in the day. How much use of Article 6 Japan plans to have?
詳しい情報は明日のサイドイベントで、また聞いていただければしっかり説明させていただきたいと思います。というのを誰が Sorry.
Thank you very much for your question. We'd like to refer that question to our side event. If you would kindly participate in our side event, you will hear more details. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Orita. I'm sure many of us will be there attending the event. Now, let me Let me now switch to part of the other side of this equation, which is those that are investing money into reduce deforestation from the private sector perspective. And I would like to introduce Alan Traikoff, who is the Chief Commercial Officer of Emergent, a nonprofit organization that coordinates the LEAF Coalition. The LEAF Coalition is a public-private coalition committed to pay for 100 million tons of emission reductions from RED+. So far, it has also committed funds of about $1 billion. Alan, question to you is that LEAF is going through this process of dialogue with jurisdiction, countries, put together the proposals, apply a jurisdictional approach. Why is that you didn't go to the voluntary carbon markets and just purchase 100 million tons?
Thanks, Gabriel. First of all, I just want to thank Ms. Dager and Mr. Orita for their comments and for their accomplishments. Congratulations to both of you. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to learn from one another. So thank you. And thanks for KFS for having us. This is a tremendous event. So why wouldn't companies just go onto the private market and purchase 100 million metric tons of high quality carbon credits? And that's because there isn't 100 million tons available. I think most of us in this space would agree that there's a shortage of high integrity credits at this moment. I think you've got some wonderful project-based credits on the marketplace, but the demand is simply growing too much, and the supply in the market cannot accommodate that. So the LEAF Coalition is the world's largest public-private civil society coalition with the backing of the US, UK, Norway governments, plus 26 global companies, including Amazon, Unilever, Bayer, McKinsey, the list goes on. And yes, together we have committed $1 billion towards rewarding tropical forest countries for when they deliver emissions reductions credits through halting deforestation. So we announced that at COP26 that we had reached $1 billion. We've added on quite a number of companies since then. We hope to add on more donor governments and especially tropical forest governments. We've just opened up another call for proposals for tropical forest governments to get involved, to sign up to deliver proposals for the LEAF Coalition's consideration. In terms of scaling up finance fast into this sector, the jurisdictional RED+ approach is a great way to do that. It's inherent in the model that tropical forest governments, when they collaborate with their stakeholders in the private sector, in the public sector, with indigenous communities, when they collaborate, when they roll out policies and incentive programs and educational programs and surveillance and enforcement, when those things coalesce around this ambition, this vision within a country, then solving for deforestation across the entire set of borders is possible. And guess what? The private sector is there. They're ready to contribute. They're ready to reward tropical forest countries for doing that. And they're eager to help them reach their NDC targets. So, you know, I think the big question here is how do we scale up finance really fast to be able to solve for deforestation in 7.5 years? You do that by operating at the jurisdictional scale. Now, that's not to say you don't do projects anymore. On the contrary, you do projects, and you do more high-quality projects. But there has to be a way to address everything inside the gaps, because projects won't cover the entirety of nations and states. You have to have both models acting in a collaborative fashion. And I would say just one more thing. This isn't about just ending deforestation, which we must do in 7.5 years. And again, I'll repeat, the private sector is ready to get involved. This is what I do for a living. I call on private sector companies all day long. They're ready to get involved. This is about a long-term pathway towards remunerating tropical forest countries, not just for stopping deforestation, but for providing ecosystem services in the long run. And under the Art Trees model, which is at the moment the leading jurisdictional REDD+ model, there's a pathway by which a country can go from high deforestation today and be remunerated along the way to zero deforestation, and then being reclassified as a high forest country. And that's when they begin being compensated for protecting the trees within their borders. So this isn't just about stopping deforestation now in 7.5 years. This is a long-run economic formula that encourages jurisdictions to take the lead with their communities to take broad, wide-scale action. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan. Let me ask you, what is that you say to private sector? Come work with us, and not, for example, again, going to voluntary market, just compensating emissions with what you find there.
Yeah, I think the private sector is very sensitive to the integrity of credits that they use in association with their corporate claims. And I would like to stress that more and more companies aren't just making carbon-based claims. More and more of them are making ecosystem, biodiversity, human health claims. And I think they turn to the jurisdictional REDD+ credit, the Art Trees credit, because of the integrity of the credit. It involves a lot. It's hard for jurisdictions to comply with, but there's so many benefits that come along with that. So I think the integrity of the credit itself is incredibly attractive. And I think, frankly, that corporations want to get involved in systemic change. It's not to say that place-based stories aren't interesting. They are. But there's an opportunity for companies to get involved in expanding their portfolio of investments that they make so that they act beyond place-based investments and they look at protecting entire ecosystems and working with governments to do that. The only way to act at scale, at speed, is by involving governments who in turn have to involve their communities in order to implement the changes necessary. And I think that the private sector has very much woken up to those opportunities. And again, very encouraged by the opportunity to help countries reach their NDC targets. Thanks, Alan.
Now, let me introduce one of our virtual panelists. If he could be put on the screen. He is Mr. David Antonioli, the Chief Executive Officer of BERRA. Do we have David? Hi, David.
Hi, Gabriel. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Very well. And thanks very much, really, for being with us. If you are in the East Coast, I think that's midnight for you. Or anyway, very late. So again, thanks very much for taking the time and joining this event. As I said, David is the Chief Executive Officer of BERRA. BERRA is the organization that runs the BCS program, the Voluntary Carbon Standard, which at the moment is the leading standard by far in the voluntary carbon market. In turn, the voluntary carbon market is rapidly expanding. Last year, it crosses the threshold of $1 billion in transaction, and REDD+ is one of the biggest driver of this expansion, or about 50% of this market. David, BCS as I said, is playing a leading role in the expansion of voluntary carbon markets. And we know it is expected to grow. Now, Alan was telling us about the jurisdictional approach. Question to you is, how can individual REDD+ projects support this drive towards ending deforestation and
Sure.
do
Well,
that in a high quality fashion?
Sure. Well, thank you, first of all, for the invitation, Gabriel. Nice to see you. And thank you to KFS for sure, and to Vice Minister Daggett and Deputy Minister General Orita. It's a pleasure to be with you, and honored to share the stage with everybody. Let me just start off by reiterating what Alan was saying, that I think we need both approaches, right? Both at the project level and the jurisdictional level. But I'll talk about the projects since that's what you just you asked me to describe. The nice thing about a project is that it has a very clear boundary, and you can define the kinds of activities that you're going to support and exactly which forest you're going to protect, right? Even though that does play out at the jurisdictional level, it's more diffuse, and sometimes the funding can be more complicated, going all the way from the government down to the projects. But what projects can do is really demonstrate how you actually start to create systems and approaches to protect forests. And there's a number of REDD+ projects, forest conservation projects, using the BCS program around the world. And they're doing a number of things. And the thing that I come back to often is that, yes, these are forest conservation projects, but at their core, they really are development projects, because they're providing communities who often haven't had the resources or the ability to build schools, or have income, or have health clinics. So these projects are really doing a lot to support local communities, and at the same time, delivering life-changing and transformational types of benefits that really help communities thrive and survive without cutting down the forest. One of the best webinars that I've seen in the last, we've been trying to tell the story, right, about how REDD+ is really effective for the last, 14 years. Really, and only really for like the last 11 years since the first project was actually registered. But this first project actually was the Castigal project, did a webinar last year where they had 4 people on the webinar. And it was the person who actually manages the money coming into the project from the sale of carbon credits. And along with her was the person who's in charge of hiring the forest rangers for the project, because they're hiring more forest rangers to protect the forest and stop poaching. This is a project in Kenya. And then they had another person who was responsible for the educational program. So as you can imagine, they're going back and forth saying, well, no, I need more money for this and I need more money for that. But underlying that whole dynamic was a community effort to identify the needs of the community and a way to finance them through the sale of carbon credits. So when you ask me what is it that projects do, they can serve as experiments or ways of really learning how you actually protect forests at scale. So I would hope to see that governments embarking on jurisdictional efforts look at these individual projects and think, okay, this worked, maybe this didn't work quite as well, but we have a huge suite of interventions and activities that are being demonstrated all around the world to protect forests using different tools and different approaches. And so that's where I think, and I get very excited about the project-based approaches, because they can really provide a pathway for actually protecting forests that can be scaled. Now, of course, at the jurisdictional scale, things are a little bit different, but I think the key thing really is that projects can deliver very specific, and targeted interventions in certain areas, and they can deliver them very well. Governments, on the other hand, have different levers that they can pull. They can drive different regulations and different enabling environments. So, you know, the secret sauce, I think, or the holy grail of RED is to use both. Use projects to deliver the detailed and the interventions that help at the very localized level, and then use governments to create the enabling environment, the regulatory framework that helps to facilitate all those activities that happen on the ground. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
David, thanks. I like this combination that you put forward of localized activities, jurisdictional level ones, all of them together contributing to the cause. Now, let me ask you a question. It seems that in the voluntary carbon markets, it is RED plus land use what is, you know, the main engine of expansion. Question is, why is that the private sector is looking for this type of credits instead of going and prioritize energy, for example?
I'm sorry, what was your last one? Instead of going for what?
Instead of going and purchase energy related credits.
Right. Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure that I would make, I mean, I think we've seen a huge growth in RED projects, but, you know, this is changing all the time. We've recently seen a huge interest in removal credits, right, which aren't necessarily RED. It's the plus in RED, but it's not necessarily conservation. So there's a lot of interest in removal credits. There's a lot of interest in cook stove projects, for example. So those aren't necessarily forest conservation projects, so of course they have a link to them. But, you know, to be perfectly honest, I don't really, I'm not in the private sector, right, where we manage the program, the VCS program, and we respond to requests that are coming through. I mean, obviously you're right that there is a huge interest in RED, but I wouldn't say that the growth has been exclusively through RED. I think we've seen in RED grow significantly over the last several years, again, because they deliver, you know, real emission reductions. And if you think about it from a corporate story, it's a nice story to tell. I help protect this forest in this community, providing these sorts of support and delivering these kinds of benefits, right? Again, it's a development story, and it's very powerful. So it resonates with a lot of people, particularly in the middle of the climate crisis. We know that we are losing forest, tropical, beautiful forest, at an incredibly high rate. And so it resonates with people. It makes sense. So in that sense, I think, you know, RED, that's one of the things that RED is has certainly going for it, and one thing that I get excited about RED for sure.
Thanks, David. I'll take this idea of RED Plus as development projects, and I'd like to invite now Dr. Wangi Gitiru. Dr. Gitiru is the Global Director of Conservation at Wildlife Works, and he is responsible for evaluating environmental and social impacts of Wildlife Works RED Plus projects in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. He will be presenting actually real experiences from a project level RED Plus in Kenya. And I'm sure he will also give us some insights on development opportunities. Wangi, floor is yours.
Hi, afternoon everyone. I'm going to talk a bit about our project in Kenya that David alluded to. implemented by Wildlife Works, which is a for-profit organization that was formed in the 90s to try and harness the power of the marketplace for conservation by balancing the needs of wildlife and the needs for people. And one of the test sites that they tested this idea was in Kenya, in this dryland acacia comifera biome, southeastern part of Kenya, that is administered as community ranches, which are land that is owned by and managed by local communities as organized as groups. And the land that is currently under the RED Plus project is about 200,000 hectares in 15 of those types of ranches, with about 100,000 people living around the ranches, so no one actually lives in the ranches in this part. The projects were dual validated in 2 phases by the VCS and CCBA in 2010, 2011. And they generate about 1.6 million credits or voluntary carbon units every year. And so far, we've taken about 18 million tons to the market. And the market here for us has mostly been corporate. We've worked a lot with a lot of corporates, from banks to oil companies to fashion companies, etc. And we're very proud to be the first project that was selected by IFC as for their forest bond issue, where investors could get their coupons in terms of credits rather than cash. But we try to diversify, and with the nesting and jurisdictional RED, we think we can get into the sovereigns and more public finance. And also we try to get into the individual credits, and a few years ago we did a short clip called Dear Future Generations, Sorry, by an American spoken word artist. And I encourage you to watch it and see whether you'll be inspired to buy our credits as well. But through this, we've done many iterations of benefit sharing models where we've come up with a kind of a waterfall that is, I'm not going to try and unpack here today, but suffice to say that from the project revenues of all our gross sales, we try to make sure that 60% of all the revenues accrue to the local communities, either through revenue shares or project operating expenses where goods and services are delivered to the project, or through profit share. So once you get all that, you get to some profits. And these profits are shared in the Kenya project by the project developer and the local communities. And the local communities have their own self-determined mechanism that they choose to allocate and distribute this finance. And they do this through livelihood security, again, as David was saying. These are mostly like development projects. So they do sustainable charcoal, they do human-wildlife conflict mitigation, agricultural intensification, and other income-generating activities, all to uplift the communities and to help them move away from needing to use up the forest resources directly. And this is a model that we are implementing in the various projects that we are doing. In red here are countries that we have active projects in: Cambodia, in Kenya, in the DRC, and in Colombia. And using private sector finance that we recently secured of up to 2 billion to deliver about 30 projects or 20 million credits annually to the market, with forward contracts of purchase for about 10 years at fair market prices. And this, we are looking at various countries in blue here to expand, and I encourage you, if you have any potential projects that we can discuss, kindly come and see any of our guys or talk to us at Wildlife Works. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Wangi. I was lucky, and a few years ago, actually, I was visiting the Kasegao project, and it was a wonderful experience. And indeed, it's not only a carbon an emission reduction project; is really a development initiative. With that, I'd like to thank Mr. Orita. He will have to leave us for another engagement. Mr. Orita, thanks very much for being with us. We were grateful for your intervention. Now I will invite you, the second round of panelists, to turn off their cameras. We have Mr. Tristan Lecomte, Mr. Ravi Mutaya, and Mr. Benjamin Singer speaking. Now, more on the, I would say, on that mix of making sure there are productive activities in the field, while at the same time we make sure that these are deforestation free. And I'd like to then invite our first speaker, Mr. Datuk Ravi Mutaya. He is the Secretary General of the Ministry of Plantation Industries and Commodities of Malaysia. His ministry is actively working on sustainability issues related to palm oil, timber, and rubber. Mr. Mutaya, thanks very much for being with us. I'd like to ask you if you could share with the audience examples of how Malaysia is putting together policies to crowd in agribusiness investments in unsustainable commodity practices.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gabriel. So, very good morning and greetings from Malaysia. So, yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of Malaysia. And as you all know, before I begin, I would like to just to give you a bit of background. As you know, Malaysia, although occupies a land area of only 330,000 square meters, its policies are definitely aligned to almost all the international agreements, goals, targets, and indicators. To name a few, the Paris Agreement, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2030, which is in fact aligned to a 5-year development plan, which we call it the 12th Nation Plan, and also to the Global Forest Goals. So today, Malaysia's forested area covers about 55.3%, and we have continued to maintain this. And Malaysia's continuous commitment to ensure sustainably managed forested land and conservation are undertaken through various national level policies and also sectoral level policies, as well as state level planning. And at the national level, we also have this partial development plan, where it is known as the National Physical Plan. Currently, we are in the 4th National Physical Plan, which actually sets the strategic spatial planning process of the nation and implementation action to provide direction for land development and land conservation. And the 4th National Physical Plan is also aligned and emphasizes on protecting and maintaining the central forest spine in peninsular Malaysia. And countries like Malaysia and other developing countries who have significant forested land, we continue to face challenges in maintaining, preserving, and protecting forest resources with the increasing population development needs, such as housing and infrastructure, as well as managing illegal activities. And this intervention definitely will require huge financial resources and commitment to continue to protect forests and halt deforestation and degradation of forests. Now, various funds and allocations are being made available, whether directly or indirectly, to ensure that our forests are sustainably being managed, and also to address issues related to deforestation in Malaysia. And the cost of maintaining and preserving these country's forest areas, which covers about 18.27 million hectares, is enormous and requires, and for this purpose, 6 billion ringgit or 1.5 US billion ringgit is needed for this purpose. And I also like to highlight that some of the financial instruments that were created include the National Conservation Trust Fund for Natural Resources, Forest Development Trust Fund under the governments under the state governments, and the latest being the Malaysia Forest Fund, which was established in 2021, where we expect to receive USD 100 million ringgit the next 7 years for the purpose of conservation, including to uplift the socio-economic standards of the people who depend on the forest for livelihood. So, and also I'd like to highlight that in Malaysia, forestry and land matters are, as we all know, is under the jurisdiction of various state governments, and enforcement is mainly through their respective forest, land, and laws. For the agri-commodity sector, whereby the Ministry of Plantation Industries and Commodities is in charge, funding to halt deforestation are mainly financed by federal government by way of grants or loans, which cover a wide scope of programs and projects. And some programs are funded through the imposition of levies, timber levies, and palm oil cess. And among the most significant program, which has a direct impact to mitigate deforestation, is the federal forest plantation programs, where a soft loan and easy payment schemes are given to interested parties to establish forest plantation on degraded forest land or idle land. This is to ease the pressure on the reserve permanent forested land. And towards this, for the past 15 years, an allocation of 1.5 billion ringgit, or equivalent to USD 335 million, is already been allocated and channeled to the companies to support this initiative. And other than that, we have also implemented timber certification schemes, such as the Malaysia Timber Certification Scheme, known as the MCTS, which is operated by the Malaysian Timber Certification Council since 2001. And this is to ensure sustainably management of forests. And I'm also happy to say that it is the first tropical timber certification scheme to be endorsed by the PEFC in the Southeast Asian region. And today, 30 forest management units covering an area of 5.42 million hectares are certified. This comprises of 30% of the total forested land. And also we have 379 certificates of change of custody holders, which has been issued to stakeholders along the value chain to ensure traceability and legality of timber supply. And indirect intervention is undertaken through the mandatory certification for palm oil. I think most of you are aware. We have a total area of about 6 million hectares in Malaysia, and to ensure the sustainability of this plantation, the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil Certification, which has been introduced in 2013 and implemented in 2015. It is being implemented to ensure that the oil palm plantations are sustainably managed. Not only sustainably managed, but also to ensure that environment-related factors, natural resources, biodiversity, and ecosystem services are also protected. And I also like to highlight that this MSPO certification adheres to all the more than 60 national and state laws related to forestry and environment requirements. And we have made it mandatory effective from 1st January 2020. And to support this, the Malaysian government has given a grant of more than 230 million, or rather more than 53 million USD, to encourage plantation smallholders to come on board. And smallholders especially, as we know, since you're being small, finances are provided to defray the cost of MSPO in terms of the training provided, the auditing, the providing personal protective equipment, and also for them to set up chemical storage facilities. And today, I'm happy to say that 96% of the matured oil palm planted areas in Malaysia are certified. And
Mr. Mutaya, let me
also,
yeah, continue.
And just and also we have a policy intervention whereby the government is committed to limit the expansion of oil palm plantations to 6.5 million hectares nationwide. That means there'll be no more opening of new plantation, and this will also help to address the issue of deforestation. And also we would undertake initiatives to forbid new plantation on peat soil and ban conversion of permanent protected forests for other developments, including oil palm plantations. And also towards committing making available official maps of oil palm planted areas publicly. And in addition to that, I would like to add that we have collected a special 1 ringgit cess that works out to an annual collection of 20 million to finance reforestation and wildlife conservation efforts. And this is being undertaken and will be channeled to the foundation, which is known as the Malaysian Palm Oil Green Conservation Foundation, who will provide financial assistance to forestry departments and NGOs.
Mr. Mutaya, thanks very much for that.
I think I will end there. And I'm sorry about the slides. I think the slides are just, we can go on to the next slide. You know, the slides are basically to give you an overall of what I'll be talking about. Thank you, Dr. Gabriel. I will end there.
Thanks very much for that, Mr. Mutaya. Now, I will quickly like to introduce Benjamin Singer. He is a senior forest and land use specialist from the Green Climate Fund. And as you know, the GCF is the largest international climate funding mechanism under the framework of the UNFCCC. Ben, we've been hearing about deforestation-free supply chains. The presentation from Malaysia told us a lot about that. Now, why does the GCF care about that? And what is that you could do in such a big space?
Thank you very much, Gabriel. In fact, the GCF cares a lot about deforestation-free supply chains. We've actually highlighted this as one of our main priorities in forest and land use for the years to come. This is for two reasons. First of all, when we just look at the figures, between 60 and 90% of tropical deforestation is driven just by 6 agricultural commodities. So if we want to address the deforestation problem in the tropics, we have to address these drivers. And the second reason is that we can only address this issue if we crowd in private finance at scale, and the GCF is specifically designed to do that. We have a range of financial instruments. We have a high risk appetite to unlock private finance at scale. So in the couple of minutes that I have left, I just wanted to highlight our approach, which is based on 4 stages. The first stage is transformational planning and programming. So it's just really ensuring that the readiness is there in the producer countries so that the regulations for producing these commodities is aligned with the regulations which seem to be taking shape in a lot of consumer markets, notably in the US, in the UK, in the European Union, which are introducing new legislation on deforestation-free supply chains. And this we mainly provide through our readiness window in the form of grants. The second stage is catalyzing climate innovation. It's about identifying fairly small-scale projects, financing them through grants to test new models of deforestation-free production and supply chains. And so it's looking at the different models that exist out there, testing them, kicking the tires on them. Our third step, building on the second one, which is basically testing these models, is that once you have one or more models which have been tested, which have been proven to work, then the third step is about scaling them up. And this is where we use our different financial instruments at hand. Loans, equity, guarantees that de-risk private investment so that we can replicate these models, we can build them up, we can scale them up to national level or beyond. Right? And these two middle steps, catalyzing climate innovation and mobilizing finance at scale, really is about shifting that needle, about the paradigm shift, which is also a core concept of the GCF. And then once we've shifted the needle, once we've conducted we've financed that paradigm shift, we have to keep the needle in its new position. And that's the fourth step, which is aligning domestic finance with sustainable development. And it's all about how the GCF can support domestic financial institutions, central banks, public development banks, private banks, and enhance their leverage capacity to actually finance basically these new models of deforestation-free supply chains.
Thanks very much, Ben. I understand you have to leave, and I would like to thank you very much for being with us today. Now, let me switch. We have two additional speakers, virtual ones. I'd like first to introduce Tristan Lecomte. He is the executive president of the PUR project. Tristan, are you with us?
Yes, hello, good morning, everybody. Very happy to be with you.
Thanks, Tristan, for being with us. We hear you very well. We are talking about a deforestation-free supply chain. In a sense, that is what people also called a way of insetting, and the PUR project is active on this idea. I want you to give us a bit of more information about what PUR is doing on that, and what is that you propose to companies. How do you convince companies to do the effort?
Thank you very much. So indeed, with Pure Project, we are a social enterprise specialized in developing insetting project. It's a concept that we formalized in 2008. It's a pun, actually. It means insetting means offsetting the climate footprint of a company by intervening within the supply chain of the company, mostly at the supplier level, for example, doing agroforestry, reforestation, and as well reducing the deforestation in the whole watershed where the company is sourcing its products from. We develop these projects in the voluntary market, so they are usually Vera certified or gold standard certified. And it's very interesting for companies to engage via insetting because they invest within their supply chain. It means, for example, they support the small-scale farmers in tropical countries, which are supplying them with coffee and cocoa. So the company doesn't only get a carbon credit, but it gets as well a benefit within its supply chain, because when we plant, for example, trees in agroforestry model, we increase the yield, we secure the yield by protecting the crops from extreme climate events, which we see more and more happening all over the world because of climate change. And as well, by planting the trees, we enrich the soil, we preserve the water cycle, we preserve biodiversity. So we increase, for example, the level of pollination. So it has a direct impact on the quality and on the resilience of the supply chain of the company. And as well, we feel it's much more legitimate for a company to offset its footprint by investing within its supply chain, because it's transformative of the agricultural practices within its supply chain, instead of just continuing business as usual and then buying offsets from a remote project where maybe the company will never go, with eventually very limited impacts, and as well, which will not be transformative of the company. So we think insetting is the future of climate action for companies. And recently, the net zero strategy and SBTI have been reconfirming that, because as you may know, now companies do not go for climate neutrality claim, but they go for net zero claims. And when you look at the framework for net zero, you can only buy removals. It means planting trees, mostly today, because it's the main technology available today to offset the footprint. And beyond that, within the SBTI, soon it will be recognized as well that when the offsetting happens via an insetting process, meaning planting within farms which are traceable, then it will be recognized as well as a reduction. So companies will be able to integrate this insetting their reduction. So it opens a big paveway for companies to engage within their supply chain, to reduce the deforestation, but as well to regenerate their supply chain and to record that as an offset within their net zero strategy, or even as a reduction within their SBTI goals. So with Pure Play, we've been planting more than 20 million trees with more than 150 multinationals around the world. And we see that there is a growing demand for nature-based solution removal via insetting. Some people say indeed that there is a growing demand for removals, and we think that the market is going towards insetting nature-based solution more and more, and that integrated and much more legitimate approach for climate action for companies.
Tristan, thanks very much for that. Tell us in a minute how these companies question is, you were telling about the advantages of insetting versus offsetting. Now, is there a company having a clear reward by doing this, or is this just a corporate responsibility and it is absorbed as part of the costs of doing business?
Thank you. No, indeed, we see now companies investing millions and tens of millions of dollars for their insetting strategy. So it goes much beyond just a CSR engagement. For example, we've been insetting Nespresso for more than 8 years now. They've been planting more than 7 million trees. And at first, their engagement was for an image purpose, but they've seen that by planting trees, for example, in Colombia, where they source a lot of their coffee, they were able to reduce the spread of the coffee rust. Coffee rust is a fungus that is threatening the yield, and so threatening the procurement of Nespresso high-quality coffee. So Nespresso today is doing insetting with us, not only to offset its footprint and for its image, but as well to secure its long-term procurement of high-quality coffee, and as well to increase the quality of its coffee. Because if you want good coffee, you need the grain to be dense, and if you want the grain to be dense, you need a rich soil, and if you want soil, you need trees. So it shows that Today, some companies, those engaged with insetting, have understood that planting trees and engaging for climate goes much beyond an image stake, but what is at stake is the future of their business model. And if they want their business model and their supply chain to be resilient, they have to invest within their supply chain. They know that they will have to invest tens or hundreds of millions of dollars for climate, but they have much more interest to do it within their value chain rather than to spend money in projects that they will never see or with impact that they are not sure will really help their own business. So there is a direct benefit for them. And of course, in this case, companies are much more interested by that, but it goes much beyond the CSR. We see the same now going from Nespresso, which is more high quality brand, into the whole Nestlé strategy.
Thanks very much, Tristan. Really, really interesting. There is an economic case for companies to embrace. Last but not least, I'd like to invite Carlos Ruiz Garbia from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. He has a presentation for us on a topic. It's quite a hot topic these days, and it is the interface, the combination of green bond frameworks integrated with carbon financing. Carlos, are you with us virtually?
Yes, I think I've been transferred now. I have a slide that I would like to project. So good morning, everyone. Greetings from Boston. It is my pleasure to join you today at this World Forestry Congress, and it's been a real honor also to join this fantastic panel. I really enjoy the interventions. Thanks for to the organizers for the kind invitation. As Dr. Labate mentioned, my name is Carlos Ruiz Garbia. I'm appointed as a project manager for a new initiative called the Global Innovation Hub at the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat. So in this very short intervention, 3-minute intervention, I will briefly present and talk about the new initiative that has been launched recently at COP26 in November in Glasgow last year. And the initiative is called the Global Innovation Hub. And I will also, in the second part of this intervention, talk a little bit more about the topic that has been announced. Is one of the work streams we are working within the hub that is connected to a reform green bond approach with aim to mobilize climate finance for implementation of the climate goals. So we believe that this approach is perfectly compatible to the forestry-based mitigation activities. Let me move to part one, is introducing the initiative itself, just to give you a little bit of a sense of what we are trying to achieve here. The idea is to aim countries and participants of the hub. It's a collaborative platform to facilitate and promote dialogues on long-term climate commitments and pledges that are based on what is needed and what is recommended by science. We recently received the IPCC report, as opposed to what is perceived as currently possible. So the main idea here is to provide tools to increase ambition, but also to help countries to effectively implement their NDCs. So again, it's not looking into what is currently perceived as possible, but is forward-looking into what is needed, so then we can amplify the innovation space. This initiative, the Global Innovation Hub, also aims to promoting transformative 1.5 solution-oriented approaches that satisfy core human needs versus the existing problem-oriented approach that focus very much on decarbonizing existing sectors, where the efforts tend to be in some occasions only incremental. So the idea here is really to disrupt the high carbon intensive value chains and provide the space for climate and climate innovation as a whole. So this is about the Global Innovation Hub. So stay tuned. I'm sharing some of the links where you can visit and and see the work plan towards a COP27. We are planning to launch a collaborative digital platform and also promote dialogues at COP that are around innovation, particularly on digital and climate, digital finance, and also bringing actors, particularly from cities, but also startups in the context of these dialogues. The second part of my intervention focuses on a work that has been presented at this Congress. It's one of the papers that we have printed in the gallery of posters, and this work stream under the Innovation Hub is looking into reform financing instruments to accelerate impactful climate action. So this work follows a technology-driven approach proposed by the project executive, Masamba Choye, and it is produced in collaboration with a project led by the Bank of International Settlement and Partners called Genesis. So in a nutshell, this idea consists on a financial product that has in effect a warrant attached to the green bond tied to the amount of GHG emissions reduced by a given mitigation project. Could be, for example, a forestry-based mitigation action that is also linked to the price of carbon. So it's very much linked to carbon markets. This approach is expected to be pilot in a project. It's a forestry project in the Yucatan Peninsula towards the end of the year, and you will have more information and the contact details in the slide that is presented, but also in the poster that is printed on site. So to close my intervention, I would like to invite you all to join us at the United Nations Climate Change Global Innovation Hub and to learn more about this reform green bond framework that is compatible with the implementation of forestry-based mitigation action and the climate goals. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Carlos. And actually, thanks very much because you are in Boston. It's very late now in Boston, and really appreciate the fact that you are with us. With this, we close this session. I want to thank again to all the panelists, those that are present here, those that are virtual, and those that have had to go to other engagements. Thank you all for being with us. Have a lovely day. Goodbye.
Everyone.